Do you overthink things? I mean, really overthink things sometimes? Does it happen a lot just before you go to sleep too? Well, you might have HyperBrain. Find out about it and what to do about it after this.
My name is Dave Farrow. I'm a two-time and current Guinness record holder for memory and founder of Farrow Communications. Join me as I teach the secrets to PR, marketing, and business that helped me become an international best-selling author with millions in sales. I promise you'll learn something and maybe we'll have some fun along the way.
All right, welcome back, and thanks for joining us at Dave Farrow Learning, where we talk about the brain and really how to maximize your mental effectiveness. Today we're talking about HyperBrain or overthinking. Now, if you're in this camp, then you can actually take a little compliment here. HyperBrain was first attributed to people with a high IQ. As it turns out, the smarter you get, the more you overthink things quite a bit. It's also associated with ADD and ADHD, both of which I've been diagnosed with, so it affects me quite a bit. And I've actually come up with a lot of coping strategies and tools that work for me as well as for my students that we're going to be talking about in this video. Now, the first point about HyperBrain is it tends to affect two main areas in life, and essentially it affects your sleep. A lot of people who have a HyperBrain get insomnia, and it affects your relationships. And a lot of times the relationships are really affected by overthinking, critical thinking, and also your inability to do direct decision making. Now, it can affect your professional life and everything else, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on these main areas. Now, starting off, insomnia. Now, a lot of people can't get to sleep at night. That doesn't mean you have HyperBrain. But if you specifically find that as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain just keeps on going. In fact, it speeds up. You start overthinking things that happened that day. Maybe you're overthinking things that are going to happen in the future, things like that. Then you might have HyperBrain, and that's actually a very good thing, because once you understand why you can't fall asleep, then you can actually solve your insomnia. Now, I had this in a big way. I've been diagnosed both as a high IQ and also as ADD and dyslexic, so I had kind of a double whammy with the ADD. Just before going to bed, I would just get overthinking to a tremendous degree. Now, the interesting thing is, this is also where I came up with some of my best ideas. Some of the most brilliant ideas that I had just as I was falling asleep, and most people are in that boat. Some of the greatest ideas you have is just as you're about to fall asleep. So part of me doesn't want to lose that, right? And that might actually be part of the problem, because when we have a situation in life that benefits us in some way, we don't want to lose that, even if it hurts us in another way. And very often we don't realize we can split those two. We can actually take away what hurts us and still keep what benefits us. Now, if you're getting insomnia, it's probably because you're kind of overthinking things as you start to drift off to sleep. A couple of things that can help you tremendously is to shut off artificial light. Really, insomnia wasn't really a big problem in life until we came up with the invention of the light bulb. So blame Edison and Tesla maybe, because what happens is our brain looks at light, any artificial light source, and thinks it's the sun. The same things go on in the brain, and as a result, the brain still thinks it's daylight, even though it's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. As a result, your neurochemistry has changed significantly. I won't get into all of the details behind it, but suffice to say that when your brain thinks it's daylight, it makes it very difficult for you to fall asleep, and this triggers kind of a inconsistency in the brain. So shut off your screens, shut off a lot of the light around the house, maybe dim some of the lights, that sort of thing. Now, the next thing that I want you to think about is to start reading. Now, it's really important, if you hear my previous tip about shutting down some of the lights, do not read in low light. That can hurt your eyes. So you are allowed to have light on if you're reading, and you can have a fairly bright light as long as you can see the words clearly, because if you try to read in low light, that can hurt you. But all things being equal, if you have a light that is just powerful enough to read, you don't have to light up the whole house, in other words, and you don't have to have TVs on and screens on and video games on, because that winds your brain up and you're trying to wind down. So reading and writing are really, really good just before bed. It actually has solved insomnia for so many different people. Another thing that I want you to think of is meditation. Now, meditation is a fantastic practice, but most people they get it wrong, or they're a little intimidated intimidated by it because they think they have to meditate for hours and achieve some sort of enlightenment or something. Really, all it really is just kind of clearing your mind and calming down. If you think of meditating like just daydreaming or calming down, then you're very close to what true meditation and all the gurus really try to achieve. What I specifically suggest if you're having insomnia is to meditate just before bed. Pick 2 minutes at first. Try to build up to maybe 10 minutes where you just clear your mind and relax. Focus on your body, visualize different parts of your body. Sometimes I visualize a flame inside me or a candle flame, things like that. Any image that you're trying to hold on to. And here's a really nice, very simple meditation exercise for you to do. Visualize anything. As I said, I visualize a candle flame and picture it in your mind's eye. And then when that picture changes, as it will, then start over. Now, this is something that Tibetan monks used to do for millennia, and that's actually where the idea of the Tibetan prayer beads came from. That actually inspired the rosary in the Catholic Church. Monks talked to monks even back then. Isn't that interesting? So essentially what the exercise is to hold an image in your mind. Let's say I'm holding on to an image of a rose or holding on to an image of a flame, and I picture it in my mind, and then let's say the flame goes out or it skews or it changes color or something. Then I just pause and I restart at the beginning. I restart at the beginning of that image, and if I had prayer beads with me, I would move to the next bead. And this practice is really powerful because it trains you to hold an image in your mind's eye for a long period of time without it changing. When it changes, that means that you can't calm down. And the more you try to go back to that image again and again and hold it for just a couple of milliseconds longer, well, that's training your brain to calm down. All meditation really is at this level, it's a very simple technique, is just to practice that exercise, and every time the image changes, go back to the original image and try again. Pretty soon you'll be able to do this and hold on to an image for minutes at a time, which is an amazing feat. When you actually achieve that, I got to tell you, there's a sense of euphoria and just joy that comes from that. All right, so maybe meditation is not your thing. How about journaling? So Marcus Aurelius is one of the most famous Stoics in history, and I'll talk about Stoicism more later on. He developed a simple practice of journaling on a regular basis. He would walk around with this journal called Meditations. It was actually published later on, turned into an international bestseller, and he never really intended to have it be a book. That's the funny thing about it. But really the practice of journaling is a Stoic practice, but it goes back even further than that. It's essentially the idea that you want to get all of your thoughts out of your head and onto paper, or at least get it out of your head. So I have times where just before bed I have some of the most amazing thoughts, and I have a pen and paper ready there right beside the bed for me to jot it down just before I go to bed. In fact, I call it my big idea. Every night I have a big idea that seems at least big at the time. The next day I look at it and it's not always the greatest idea. Sometimes it's pretty brilliant. But do that yourself. As you start to drift off to sleep, you'll find that your hyperbrain is kicking in, and write down that big idea or two. Take a moment. Don't see this as an evil thing that's distracting you. See it as a positive thing that you can use, and then write down that idea and then go back to bed. And that one exercise can make a huge difference. Another thing that's related to this is called event rehearsal. And event rehearsal is essentially what it sounds like. It's you mentally rehearse an event before it happens. And this is something that I've done in my brain hacking career for years. I taught people this, and several Olympic athletes that I know use event rehearsal quite a bit before, well, events. So what it essentially involves is imagine an event that you want to happen happening the way you want it to happen. So for example, there was this great study done, it was a long time ago, but it really still holds up, where they got a bunch of students to visualize throwing a basketball into a net. And they got them to visualize it over and over and over and always getting the basket into the net. They also had two other groups. One group that during the same period of time was actually playing basketball and shooting a basketball into a net, and they had the control group that was doing nothing. So as you can imagine, after the study was over, the control group did not do better at basketball than they did before the study. The group that was practicing basketball every day for about an hour did do better, but the interesting thing is the kids who just sat down for an hour and were told to visualize successfully playing basketball and getting the basketball into the net actually succeeded, and they improved their game about as much as the people who were actually playing basketball. And the reason for that is, on some level, your brain can't tell the difference between what is real and what is actually imagined. This is why it's really important to control those critical thoughts in your brain. So when you're visualizing playing basketball, your brain thinks it's actually happening. And if you want to overcome your insomnia, what you can do is actually visualize the next day. It's as simple. Start from the beginning, picture the day going the way you want it to go, and you'll find that the next day turns out really well for you. The other thing about this is it does tend to fight the hyperbrain activity, because your brain starts to calm down when it knows that tomorrow will come and everything will be fine, and we're going to, our brains are going to be there the next day, and it's going to work out just fine. So try that event rehearsal. In fact, I would add to it and say that you want to add preparing for the next day, even to the point where you set out your clothes for the next day. All of these practices of preparing for the next day actually really help you, especially if you make them into a regular ritual every day. It really helps you with insomnia and overcoming those problems. All right, now on to the next part of hyperbrain or overthinking, which is relationships. Overthinking can really tax your relationships and really affect the people that love and care about you. And it does it in a bunch of really insidious sorts of ways. First of all, overthinking does kill your happiness. And if somebody cares about you, they want you to be happy. So overthinking things will actually make other people miserable, just like you. So some of the things you want to start thinking about is, does your hyperbrain or overthinking turn into over-criticizing of yourself? If you're very critical of yourself and your own internal dialogue, chances are you're very critical of other people in your life. And that's a time to really start worrying, because nobody wants to be around somebody who is critical all the time, even if they're right. I'm going to use an analogy from the old Star Trek episode, the classic series. There was an episode called Mudd's Women. And in hindsight, that title and its contents have not aged very well in the Me Too era. But the whole idea was there was this guy named Mudd who was like an engineer, and he had a bunch of robots, and they were all female. Wow, even this anecdote is not aging well, but I'm going to plow through. The whole idea of it was that these robots could be destroyed by just catching them in a logic fallacy. So like, Kirk was laughing while he said he was sad, something like that. And what happened was the robots basically overthought the situation, and they were overthinking to the point where it killed them. For a modern analogy, maybe you think of, Picard and the Borg when they were thinking of giving the Borg a problem that they couldn't solve, and it would overthink them into death. So why are all my references Star Trek? I don't know. But plowing on, the main point I'm trying to make is that hyperbrain is just like that. You end up going over and over things or being overly critical of things to a level where it kills you. And the first step is to actually be aware of this. Be aware that you may be overthinking things and there might not be any answer at all. One of the solutions for this is to stop fixating. Practice switching topics. If you find that you've gone over the same thing twice or 3 times, then switch to a new topic. Really force yourself to do it, and it takes practice because it is difficult to do this at first. The next thing is to actually consciously tell yourself to relax. Let yourself know that there is no danger and that you can actually relax. One of the best ways that you can trigger relaxation in the body is actually deep breathing. Don't breathe through your chest like we normally do. That actually simulates hyperventilating and actually tells your brain and your body to get more stressed. But breathe through your stomach, where your stomach goes in and out, and that'll actually trigger relaxation in the brain. One other final thing about relationships in this, decision making can be a big problem, especially with arguments. So avoid arguing with a spouse or loved one late at night, because hyperbrain can be more hypervigilant late at night. And you can also have hyperbrain, keep in mind, you can also have hyperbrain from trauma, PTSD. In that case, it would be called hypervigilance typically in most circles, but it's the same sort of thing. It's this anxiety over minutia and details. So what you want to try to do is to tell yourself that there is no danger, just to remind yourself that everything is fine. And some of the other tips that I gave earlier about preparing for the next day actually help with that, because thinking about the future helps you stop worrying about the present. All right, one of our final tips here is I want you to start looking into Stoicism. Stoicism has been a big practice in my life, and if I'm going to make one last Star Trek reference, it's actually the Stoics were actually the model for the Vulcans, although many people think that Gene Roddenberry got it wrong. Stoics are not without emotion, but it's just that ordinary things in life don't really bother Stoics as much because of their outlook. They expect it. I'm not going to go into all the details of Stoicism, but just suffice to say that, you know, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, some of the greatest people in history gave Stoicism their best recommendation because it helped them through some of their toughest times. And some of those practices of dealing with those strong emotions can be very, very powerful. In our daily life, we run into situations that just overwhelm us. We become emotional to an extreme extent, and a lot of that is just, you know, it's just artificial. It's false. It's not real, but it affects us as if it's real. So HyperBrain kind of, if you are prone to this, you can take a molehill and turn it into a mountain any single day. So you have to be aware of this and what you're going to do about it. All right, I want to thank you very much for watching this video, and something that I hope you don't overthink is maybe liking and subscribing to what we got going on, or checking out some of our other stuff, like some of my courses. And if you do feel like overthinking a critical comment, by all means, you know, leave those really negative comments down in the messages down below, because that will show everybody that you've overcome your overthinking there. I don't know if there's any sarcasm in that at all, but I want to thank you very much for being here, and I hope you find some of our other videos helpful. We're going to come up with new videos every week. Take care.